Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Women's Life Stories, we retell those moments, honest, everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. The string lights were strung low across the courtyard, warm as honey against the blue of evening. A trio on a tiny stage kept a velvet tempo brushes on a snare upright bass, thrumming a trumpet barely louder than the river. You could smell oak from the tasting room and crushed grass from the vineyard rows that fell away toward the Hudson. The whole place looked like a catalog, pale linen-cut crystal silk ties. A chandelier hung in the open barn like a moon. I stood near a high top, a glass of seltzer, sweating onto a cocktail napkin with the winery's crest. I had chosen a navy dress that didn't ask for compliments, and a cardigan because the valley always cools after sundown. Practical shoes, a pin tucked into my hair because my hands like to be busy. My son Noah floated across the room in a black tuxedo that made him look older and happier than he is on Tuesday mornings. He moved the way a good host moves attentive light, never stopping anywhere long enough to become a story. The story found me anyway. Somebody tapped a fork against a flute. A hush rippled forward from the dance floor and stalled where I stood. Sierra took the microphone with the confidence of a woman who knows where all the mirrors are. Her gown was the precise color of cream before it turns to butter. Her hair held the light like it had been taught. She smiled at Noah, then at the crowd, then at me. It was a generous smile, the kind that travels easily and takes nothing along with it. "We are so lucky," she said, and people hummed as if agreement were contagious. "This day, this place, these people, and family." She turned her body toward me with an actress's pivot. "Noah's mom, Mrs. Ellison, is here tonight. You may not have met her yet. She prefers to keep things humble. She's our family's little thrift store queen." The words rang clear and soft. What came next wasn't soft. Laughter, the bright kind that shows teeth. A woman near the bar choked on her drink and clapped. Someone whistled. It wasn't everyone, but it was enough to count. My napkin had soaked through to the wood. I folded it in half and pressed it flat with my thumb. Sierra giggled in the hush that followed, just a girl playing. "I mean that sweetly," she added, and then released the microphone back to the music. The bass player lifted his eyes to me for a second and looked away like he hadn't. The trumpet breathed a polite apology it didn't owe. I set the glass down and smoothed the cardigan at my elbow. My palm brushed my left hand, and the signet ring there rotated a fraction without my asking. Old habit. The metal was warm from my skin. The crest pressed into my finger the way a seal makes a mark in wax and then vanishes under an envelope. I straightened the ring, not to hide it, not to show it, just to make it correct. "Mrs. Ellison," a man said, close enough that I could smell a peat he was proud of. Gordon Hale stood with his shoulders in a tuxedo, tailored to the habit of standing that way. Silver at his temples, tan earned far from office lighting. His wife Vivian hovered just behind, draped in something green that might have been silk or money. He held his glass like a small trophy. "A beautiful evening," he said. "It is," I answered. My voice landed on the napkin flat and white. He offered his hand. When I took it, his eyes dropped one beat too to my ring. It is not by design a loud object, a simple oval, a raised mark. He let my hand go, and the muscles along his jaw did something minor and involuntary. Recognition is always a scene with no dialogue. "Forgive the humor," he said after a breath too long to be casual. "Wedding toasts can get informal." "Of course." I heard my own tone, even unbothered the tone a bridge holds when trucks pass. Vivian flashed her public smile. "You must be thrilled," she said. "A mother's dream." "That he's happy," I said. "Yes." The trio slipped into a standard and conversation rose over it like a tide. Sierra was busy with photographs near the arbor. Noah was pulled to the side by a caterer with a question. A flock of cousins turned the dessert table into a geography of opinions: lemon tart versus chocolate mousse. I stepped back from Gordon, just enough to hear the river. A breeze came thin and cool from the slope where the vines grew in disciplined lines. I am not a person who embarrasses easily. It isn't virtue, it's practice. There's a rhythm to humiliation when you've met it more than once. It arrives loudly, feeds on witnesses, fades if no one feeds it back. I let my lungs find the tempo of the bass. I let my shoulders stay where they were. The trick is not to go anywhere your bones don't want to be. A waiter came by with a tray of champagne. I shook my head. "Just water," I said, and picked up another seltzer. "You look familiar," Gordon said like an afterthought that wasn't. He squinted. Not the way people squint when they're old, but the way they do when a file opens in their mind and a page is missing. He wasn't looking at my face anymore. He was looking at a boardroom that had yammered itself into a corner years ago. I watched the calculation cross him like weather brief, sharp, undeniable. "I don't think so," I said. He smiled and failed to make it reach his eyes. Perhaps not. Vivian gave his sleeve the smallest pinch. "Gordy," she said, amused by a private thing, "they're doing the cake." The cake had been positioned for photographs, 6 tiers fresh figs, a ribbon that matched Sierra's bouquet. Someone made space for Sierra's father, and he stepped into the correct place like a man who knows the difference between foreground and background. He glanced at me once, then at the ring again, and then away so quickly the glance could be blamed on a draft. I moved toward the edge of the courtyard where the lights ended. From there the vineyard fell away into an organized darkness. You could hear the insects working. You could hear the river if you promised not to tell anyone you had. The barn's chandelier threw a slice of light across the gravel, and it shook with the footsteps of a boy in dress shoes that didn't fit. My phone buzzed. A message lit up from a number I didn't save. Brunch tomorrow, just us. Family transparency is everything. The words had the same manicure as the bride's hands. I clicked the screen black and slipped the phone back into my cardigan pocket. There's a place at the base of the throat that registers cold before the rest of you does. It woke. Noah found me at the edge and touched my shoulder the way he did when he was 6 and crowds were too tall. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," I said, and meant it in the narrow way a person means that when the evening isn't. He searched my face for something he couldn't name and kissed my temple. He still smells faintly of laundry soap when he's tired. "I'll make sure you eat," he said, and handed me a plate with a square of cake and a spoon. "Thank you," I said. He was needed elsewhere in 3 steps. I tasted the cake. It was fine. Too much almond. A woman in a satin shrug slid up next to me and pretended to be interested in the view. "Don't mind Sierra," she stage whispered. "She only teases people she likes." I smiled because it was the currency being spent. "I'm sure," I said. When I turned back toward the crowd, Gordon was watching me through a conversation he wasn't listening to. He lifted his glass of fraction in a salute that could be waved off as good manners. It didn't feel like manners. It felt like attention newly acquired and not easily returned. The trio ended the song and eased into another. A few sparklers hissed from a bucket on the bar. Someone had misread a schedule. Sierra laughed in that bright helium register, and the cousins laughed with her like it was their job. The valley air thinned as the night settled. I slid the ring once more to its home against my knuckle. The crest aligned, the oval turned inward. Then I stepped back into the light plate in hand, the taste of almonds still there, the river still on the other side of the rose. I did not go hunting for anyone. I did not leave. I did what a quiet structure does when weight lands where it shouldn't. I held. Morning came in the color of dishwater, bright enough to show fingerprints on the stainless steel. The message from Sierra waited where I'd left it, polite as a place card. "Brunch tomorrow, just us. Family transparency is everything." The word transparency does a lot of heavy lifting when it's trying to move something that won't budge. I texted sure and chose a cafe that looks out at the river. Cold Spring does coffee without ceremony, mugs thick as Knuckles' windows that sweat in summer and rattle in March. I got there early and took a table by the glass. The server set a water down, and a bead of condensation slid cleanly to the coaster. Watching it made a piece of old muscle memory twitch. Temperature differentials transfer rates the way cold moves through a system if you don't tell it not to. Back when people still thought paper could hold a supply chain steady, I spent nights with a pencil mapping where lettuce died, not the poetic way, real death wilting into brown, because a cooler door was propped open while a forklift operator told a joke. My husband and I built a model for what happened to a carton when the world was careless. We wrote an algorithm that nudged the careless parts into alignment. We didn't cure cancer. We made sure strawberries didn't either. In 2011, a mid-sized distributor wrote our name on a check with more zeros than anyone in my family had seen. $22 million buys a lot of noise if you want it to. We bought silence. A stretch of industrial land near a rail spur. 2 warehouses with good bones. Units in a REIT that didn't glitter but paid on time. Small positions in batteries that preferred the cold. We moved money the way we moved air through metal efficiently, out of sight, never wasting the difference between what's needed and what's shown. A shadow fell across the table. Sierra arrived in a coat the color of expensive oatmeal hair tucked into itself. Vivian walked a step behind, perfumed like the back row at a gala. Gordon followed with both hands in his pockets, which is one way to come unarmed and look armed anyway. "Thank you for meeting," Sierra said, sitting before I could stand. She slid a phone onto the table screen down. "We wanted," she smiled, "to reset." "Coffee?" I asked. "Cappuccino," Vivian said. "Dry." Black, Gordon added as if specifying ammunition. Sierra didn't order. She took a breath like she was stepping into water. "I'm sorry about last night," she said. "It was a joke that didn't land." "It landed," I said, "just in the wrong field." A quick laugh. "That's fair." She flipped the phone and swiped. An image appeared, a grainy business photo embedded in a trade site story. Men in suits around a table, eyes hunting the next page. At the edge, half hidden by a banker's shoulder, a woman's hand rested near a legal pad. The hand wore an oval signet ring. Sierra zoomed gently the way you pet a cat you haven't met. This is from a piece about Hale Dynamics pandemic financing. It mentions a bridge facility from an entity called North Current Capital. The article doesn't identify individuals, but the photographer caught this. Her eyes flicked to my left hand on the table. Vivian leaned in. "Charming ring," she said. "It was my father's," I answered. "True and not useful." Gordon watched my face instead of the screen. He wasn't trying to trap me. He was trying to find the trap he'd already stepped on. He said nothing, and in that said enough. Sierra kept her tone light. "I don't care about old paperwork," she said, "which is precisely what you say when you do. What I care about is family. Noah and I want to build something real. The best families operate with clarity. No surprises." We were thinking her mouth shaped the word as if it were new, a trust. A family trust, where assets present and future can be managed with input from all sides. 3 voices, 3 votes. It protects everyone. "Everyone," Vivian echoed. "Everyone," Gordon said, though it stuck a little in his throat. The server arrived with the cappuccino, the black coffee, and a fresh water for me. Sierra waited until the cup settled. "We could start modestly," she went on, butter knife smooth. "What matters is the structure, the signal it sends." "The signal," I repeated. "Transparency," she said again, and set the phone down so the ring stared back at all of us. No more mystery, no misunderstandings, just family. My spoon made a careful sound against the side of the glass. I looked at Sierra, then at the river where a barge pushed itself north with patient lungs. "I appreciate the invitation," I said, "and the apology, and the trust," she asked in a tone that pretended not to care about the answer. "I'll think," I said. Sierra's smile renewed. "Thinking is good." Vivian touched my sleeve. "We want to do this gracefully," she added. "Noise helps no one." Gordon said nothing. His gaze fell to my ring and stayed there as if the metal could choose him back. We finished brunch the way people finish formalities, cutting food into ambassadorial pieces, exchanging niceties about views and weather and the price of gas as if we were all subject to it. When they left, Sierra squeezed my hand like a teammate who expects the play to run as drawn. The door closed behind them with cafe glass insistence. I paid the check and stepped into a wind that smelled faintly of stone. The river pretended to be still. In the distance, a freight groaned toward wherever the country keeps its surplus. I walked to the car without deciding anything. Not deciding is a decision that costs less up front. By late afternoon, the sky had washed itself into a color TV advertisers used to call daylight. I was rinsing cherries in a colander when my phone vibrated with a number I didn't recognize. The text read, "Hi Mara Jared from Supply Line Journal. Working a follow-up on North Current Capital's role in essential infrastructure financing 2020-21. Quick comment on your involvement, on background if you prefer." He added a link to the old photo and a smiling emoji he deleted before sending. The ghost of it showed anyway. A second ping email from a legal account I pay for by the hour. We received an informal inquiry from the AG's office and a separate letter from FINRA requesting general info about holdings tied to North Current. Nothing urgent, but not nothing. Call when you can. I washed the cherries twice to make sure my hands were busy. The inquiries weren't illegal, and neither was anything they might trip over. Legality isn't the only currency in a market where perception sets the price. You can be right and still be dragged. Noah called then, voice coated with the thin fatigue of after-party logistics. "Hey, Mom, you make it home." "I did. Aunt Elise says you left early." "I didn't," I said. "I stood where the light ends." He laughed, then stopped as if remembering a rule. "Sierra said she saw you this morning. We had coffee. She's excited," he said, which can mean many things. "Wants all of us on the same page. Books have more than one." Silence. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "Eat dinner, drink water." "Always the engineer," he said, and I could hear him smile. "Love you." "Love you." After we hung up, I put the cherries in a bowl and set them on the counter where the afternoon lands. The house went quiet, in the useful way it does when it's waiting for instructions. I opened a drawer and took out an old spiral notebook with grease on the cover from a life that made room for tools. Inside, in my handwriting that never learned to perform, were lists of things that once needed doing: replace gasket on walk-in 3, recalibrate temp probe on dock B, remind Roberto to close the cooler door while he jokes. I found the page where we wrote numbers the week the check cleared. Not the dollars, the hours. What we would work to justify a windfall that could make a person lazy. Beside it, a note in my husband's block letters: "Build quiet. Keep it that way." The phone was heavy in my palm for a beat. Then it wasn't. I called the number that answers when the market stops using its inside voice. "Ellison," a woman said. The calm in her tone was the kind you get from long winters. "Dana has been my first call since the year the warehouse roof learned to collect snow." "I need a full profile on the Hales," I said. "Personal and corporate, debt covenants, cash flow liens, any media contracts, who's whispering to whom, timeline." "Today," I said. "Tonight." A pause as she set her pencil to paper. I'll start with public filings and work out. Thank you. One more thing, Dana said. North Current. Dormant, I answered. And that's how I like it. We hung up without ceremony. The bowl of cherries held the room in a small red way. Outside, a neighbor dragged a recycling bin to the curb, plastic banging like a drummer trying to find the downbeat. I turned the signet ring until the crest faced my palm and stayed there. Then I sat at the table where the afternoon had spread itself and waited for the phone to ring for reasons I would answer. Dana called as the light came down to its thinnest edge. You asked for the Hales, she said. Paper moved under her voice. I pulled public filings, UCC, Leans County records, the usual. I'm listening. Primary residence mortgaged to 78% LTV after a cash out last fall. Secondary property in Palm Beach under an LLC interest-only note rate steps up next quarter. Hale Dynamics took a pandemic bridge from North Current. She paused to let me own the name rolled into a senior facility with 2 covenants tied to reputational risk. They'll skate if nobody shakes the ice, and if someone jumps on it. You know how this goes, Dana said. Covenant watchers don't like headlines. Cash, consulting fees, and a series of short contracts that look like keeping the lights on, not running the theater. Gordon remains useful to committees. The committees are shrinking. Personal lines. 3 new revolving lines opened by Sierra in the last 6 weeks. Not huge, not tiny. Activity consistent with retainers and advance invoices. PR firm, Hargreaves Norrell. Boutique trust and estates shop, Burton and Lay. A payment to a digital investigator that sells itself as reputation analytics. She rustled again. 1 more item. A media string between a junior at Supply Line and someone using Sierra's personal email. Scheduling talk, very careful adjectives. I looked at the bowl of cherries I hadn't eaten. Their skins held the last of the living room's light. Thank you, Dana. I'll keep pulling, she said. If they're whispering, I'll find the wall they're whispering into. We hung up. The house returned to the kind of quiet that lets you hear your own keys when you set them down. I moved the cherries to the fridge and shut the door gently like quiet could be saved. The next morning, a zip file arrived from Dana with the short note she preferred docs attached. In it were scanned mortgages, warranty deeds, the REIT's quarterly, where Gordon gave a quote that sounded like his tie, and a contract from Hargreaves with a clause about narrative alignment in crisis. I printed the pieces that needed touching. At 10, my phone rang with a number I didn't place. Mrs. Ellison, a woman asked. This is Maya. We met last year at Noah's birthday. I wore the jade earrings and spilled Prosecco on the porch. I remembered the earrings. They had looked like drops of bottled water. How can I help you, Maya? I'm not sure if I should be calling, she said, then kept calling anyway. I was on Sierra's bridesmaid chat back when we were closer. People move. Things get strange. I'm not in the chat now. A breath. I saved something. Not because of you. Because I thought I might need to remember what was real and what was theater. I don't want anything you're not free to give, I said. I'm free, she answered. She sent me a voice memo months ago after she and Noah got serious. 19 seconds. I don't know what you'll do with it. I only know I don't want it on my phone anymore. The file landed in my messages before I could reply. I'm sorry, Maya said, and hung up like a person leaving through a side door. I listened once with the phone on the table, the speaker low. Sierra's voice nearer than it should be, as if she were speaking into a closet, and the coats made her brave. Stability matters, she said softly, almost reasonable. Noah's fine, but his mother is the key. She's old school. Real money if you can get past the thrift costume. You marry for love, sure, but you stay for structure. The memo ended with a rustle and a little laugh that knew where it was going. I pressed the screen dark. The refrigerator hummed in the kind of voice machines use when they know you're listening. Noah texted at lunch, swing by after work, bringing you the extra centerpiece. Viv left it in our car. He arrived near dusk with a vase and the indecision of someone who has 2 homes and 1 face. He set the flowers on the counter and leaned like the kitchen could hold him. Do you need anything, he asked, and meant it, which is different than asking. I need you to eat, I said. There's soup. Sit. He sat and tore a piece of bread the size of his worry. He told me about the caterer's invoice and the cousin who lost a cufflink and found it in the grass with a flashlight like a metal detectorist. He told me Sierra felt misunderstood. I'm sure she does, I said. He watched me over his spoon. Are you angry? I don't get paid for emotions, I said. I try not to do them on deadline. That sounds like you. I'm working on it, I said, and it landed the way I wanted, light, true, not an opening. He finished the soup and washed the bowl, even though the sink would have kept it like a friend. At the door, he hugged me too long for a Tuesday. She wants to smooth things, he said into my shoulder. There's been chatter, online, nothing big. Noise travels, I said. He left with the empty vase. The house accepted the new silence like a table takes a stack of mail. I took Dana's printouts and sorted them into a folder with a brass clip that had belonged to my husband. He liked objects that stayed closed when closed. At 7, I sent a message. Dinner tomorrow. 8. Roast chicken. Come hungry. I addressed it to both of them. The read receipts popped like small lights. I got up early the next day and did the things that make a house smell like a plan, onions, lemon, thyme butter, under skin salt like a decision. I put a salad together the way a person puts an argument together. Clean, sharp, nothing to hide behind. I laid out 3 plates and then added a 4th because I always add one more than I need and remove it later. It keeps you honest about who you're setting for. They came on time. Noah in a jacket he wears when he wants to look capable. Sierra in white tailored to the idea of being right. She held a leather folder close to her ribs. "Thank you for having us," she said with a smile that had been brushed. "Of course," I said, and took their coats. The chicken set the rules for the room, which helped everyone. We ate the first bites in that kind of quiet you get when food is good and words would be worse. Noah reached for the salt and didn't need it. Sierra commented on the rosemary as if it were evidence of character. I let the plates find their halfway and then stood. I went to the sideboard, opened the drawer with the brass clip, and placed the folder on the table as if it belonged to all of us. "I had some questions after brunch," I said. I asked for answers. Sierra rested her fingertips on her leather folder. "About the trust," she asked, sounding helpful. "About the trustworthiness," I said, and slid the first page toward her. 3 new revolving lines, here, here, and here. The statements lay flat, the ink plain as a receipt. "This is Hargreaves Norrell. Their contract with you includes deliverables if a legacy asset holder is uncooperative. This is Burton & Lay's retainer. And here's an email header to Supply Line Trading Times to talk about North Current." Noah's eyes moved like he was reading a map in a car that wouldn't stop. Sierra kept her face very still. "You've gone through my accounts," she said, making it an accusation to keep it from being a fact. "I looked at documents I was shown," I said. "I didn't break into anything. People leave footsteps when they want to be followed." Sierra's mouth made a straight line. "I retained professionals to protect my family," she said. "That includes you. That includes Noah. If you have assets that affect our lives, we need clarity. That's not greed. That's responsible." "It can be both," I said. Noah rubbed his thumb along the edge of his plate, like there was a dent he could fix. "Sierra," he said quietly. "What's the PR for?" "To manage narrative if there's a leak," she answered without looking at him. "Gordon's name is on things. Your mother's name may be on things. Articles can be misread. We don't control the internet." "What leak?" he asked. She lifted her chin, and for a second, I saw the girl who learned early that performance pays twice. "People talk," she said. "Jared from Supply Line called. He wants to contextualize a bridge facility. I told him we're aligned as a family. I asked him to delay until we could present a unified front. That's what I'm trying to achieve." "You called him," Noah said. "Not a question." "I spoke to him," she said, professionally. I slid my phone across the table and tapped the memo. I didn't raise the volume. Sierra's voice unrolled into the room, small and careful. "Stability matters. Noah's fine, but his mother is the key. She's old school. Real money if you can get past the thrift costume. You marry for love, sure, but you stay for structure." Noah closed his eyes once as if the lids could turn down a dimmer. He opened them and kept them on his hands. Sierra's grip tightened on the leather folder until the seam along the spine whitened. "That was private," she said. "It was honest," I said. The oven ticked as it cooled. Outside, someone's dog told the block about a squirrel. The room held steady until Sierra's voice returned to her. "I won't apologize for acting like an adult," she said. "We're building a life. We need to know where the beams are. If you'd come to us with any of this, we would have welcomed you into the conversation." "You invited me," I said. "You also invited a reporter and 2 firms that sell noise." Noah swallowed. "Mom," he said, and I could hear how much he wanted the table to be a different table. "What are you asking for?" "Less," I said. "Less talk about trusts in rooms that aren't built for it. Less strategy that starts with my closet. Less pretending a knife is a spoon." I stacked the documents and rested my hand on them. "I don't plan to be managed." Sierra set her folder down and pushed her chair back an inch, as if the air were tighter than she'd planned. "If you don't want to cooperate," she said, "we'll proceed the professional way." "Good," I said. "So will I." We cleared the plates in silence that wasn't empty. Noah carried dishes to the sink and ran the water too hot. I wrapped the chicken bones for stock because I was raised to keep what can be used again. Sierra stood, smoothed her jacket, and found her reflection in the window because the night had made a mirror of it. When they left, the latch on the front door clicked once decisive as a stamped seal. The house took its breath back and held it. Midtown has a way of flattening weather into a condition. The day we met, the sky was the color of legal pads, and the air didn't move unless you paid it. The mediation suite sat 20 floors up in a building that preferred not to introduce itself. Security badges, an elevator that hummed in a private register, a hallway carpeted to teach people to walk quietly. The receptionist smiled without teeth and took us to a room whose walls had forgotten windows on purpose. Walnut table padded chairs, a pitcher of water full of the kind of ice you get from expensive refrigerators, a bowl of almonds no one would touch. The speakerphone in the center wore a knit cozy, as if it might catch a chill. The mediator, Miss Kaplan, had the posture of someone who makes a living out of other people's posture. Gray suit, gray hair, gray voice, tuned to polite. "We'll start with names," she said, and we went around the table like a geography lesson. On one side, Sierra in white, precise as a promise. Noah in navy, the skin beneath his eyes a little thin. Vivian jeweled into steadiness. Gordon polished into something like steel. Their lawyer Harrington sleek as lacquer. On the other side, me. I set a leather folio in front of me, and the signet ring found its position without help. "Thank you for coming," Kaplan said. "We're here for a conversation about governance expectations and how to minimize unnecessary volatility." She glanced at the almonds as if they were evidence. "We'll keep voices measured and interruptions short." "Yes," Harrington smiled. "Of course." Sierra interlaced her fingers just above the table. "We're proposing a simple framework." She began a touch brighter than the room wanted. "A family trust to ensure clarity going forward. Equal votes among me, Noah, and Mrs. Ellison. An initial contribution modest to establish best practices. The number is less important than the signal." She set a single-page term summary in the center like a menu, 3 boxes, 3 signatures, 3 votes. Harrington slid his pen to the border of the page. "This creates stability and transparency," he said smoothly. "It protects all parties. It limits rumor risk." Vivian nodded once toward Miss Kaplan, then toward me. "Noise can be managed," she said. "We'd like to do that together." Gordon rested his hands flat. He didn't look at me. He looked at the ring, and then at his own cuff, as if double-checking which belonged to whom. Kaplan turned to me. "Mrs. Ellison." "I appreciate the invitation," I said. "I brought some materials that might make clarity easier." I opened the folio and let the room see its insides. Paper behaved itself, lying where I told it to lie. Exhibit A, a term sheet from North Current's pandemic bridge to Hale Dynamics. Exhibit B, the senior facility you rolled into, with the reputational risk covenant circled. Exhibit C, a clause from Hargreaves Norrell's engagement, narrative alignment in crisis, signed last month. Exhibit D, payment confirmations for Burton & Lay and a digital reputation firm. Exhibit E, an email string with a supply line reporter arranging off-record context about legacy asset holders. Sierra kept her face where she'd put it. "Public records and routine contracts," she said. "Prudent given the chatter." "Prudent can be accurate," I said, and still point in a direction. Kaplan lifted a hand. "Let's keep our sentences short," she said, not unkind. "Miss Hale, you're acknowledging that you engaged public relations and counsel with the possibility of media involvement." "Yes," Sierra said. "To avoid misinformation, to protect my husband, to protect my father." Harrington leaned in. "This is exactly why we suggest a trust," he added. "No one can misinterpret when there is nothing to interpret." I slid another page to the middle. The paper hissed against the wood like a mild verdict. "Here is the covenant language your senior lender uses when it's nervous," I said. "Here is the part about adverse publicity reasonably expected to affect public perception of borrower's business in a material way. Here I placed a second sheet beside it, is the clause that allows a rate step-up and a call if the lender thinks it hears thunder." Gordon's jaw made that small, involuntary motion again. Harrington's pen stopped being a pen and became a spear that didn't know where to point. Vivian's hand moved to the pearls at her neck, the way people touch the back of a chair when they stand too fast. Sierra exhaled through her nose a sound that stayed in her radius. "You're threatening to leak." "I'm describing the weather your actions are inviting," I said. "You rang a reporter. You retained firms that monetize storms. Lenders keep umbrellas within reach." Kaplan looked down at her notes, and then up at us, as if to remind us that notes exist in order to make people behave. "Let's move from weather reports to proposals," she said. "Mrs. Ellison, what are you asking for?" "Less," I said. "No trust, no equal votes, no structure designed to put my house keys in your kitchen drawer." I rested my palm on the folio. "Withdraw every outreach to regulators and media. In writing. Have your firm stand down. I will keep my name out of your filings and out of your parties. In exchange, Sierra receives a one-time payment." Harrington blinked like I had spoken a color. "A payment," he repeated. 3.5 to 5, I said. "I'll choose the precise number after I see actual withdrawals, not promises. It comes with an NDA I wrote with a person who enjoys commas. It comes with a non-contact clause. It comes with a requirement that Mr. Hale retain his consulting roles if and only if he stops needing them to be armor in public. You keep your house out of headlines. I keep mine out of your conversations." Noah's chair moved half an inch without his permission. He stared at a water ring on the walnut as if it could tell him the time. Sierra laughed, a light sound with a hinge in it. "You're trying to buy me off." "I'm buying quiet," I said, "and I'm valuing it high." Vivian lifted her chin. "This is insulting," she told the room, then me, then the ceiling. "We are a family." Kaplan wrote something that looked like a rectangle and could have been the word family. "We can use neutral language," she suggested. Gordon finally spoke. "You're overreacting," he said to me without anger. "We're aligning interests. You're treating us like a hostile." I looked at him. He had the sort of face that photographs well and bleeds badly. "You sold your company's future into a bridge I provided when supply chains were physics and panic," I said evenly. "You know exactly what a covenant does when it doesn't like the mirror." He went still the way a ship does when it hears ice against its hull. Harrington coughed into his fist and put his voice back together. "If we decline this payment..." "What?" Then he asked. "What's your end game?" "I don't play games," I said. "I maintain systems." I tapped the covenant clause with a fingernail. "This system is sensitive to what you've begun." Sierra placed both hands on the table as if preparing to stand. She didn't. "You have no right to manage my life," she said. "I'm not managing it," I said. "I'm declining to be cast in it." Noah rubbed his temples. "Sierra," he said softly, "did you really call Jared?" Harrington started to answer for her, and then decided he wouldn't. Sierra's mouth opened and closed around a word that didn't arrive. She looked briefly at Gordon and Vivian, not for instruction, but for appetite. When the appetite didn't appear, she turned back to Ms. Kaplan. "We need a recess," she said, the syllables crisp enough to stack. Kaplan checked a clock that told truths no one argued with. 15 minutes, she said. "There's coffee outside. Restrooms to the left." I stayed when they left. I don't drink coffee in rooms where people put their plans on mute. The quiet turned the speakerphone into a small animal. Miss Kaplan refilled her water and made a note that could have been about almonds. When they returned, Sierra had taken a shade of color out of her face. Gordon's cuff had been realigned. Vivian's pearls had decided to sit still. Harrington placed both hands flat as if bracing on a subway. "We will withdraw the media outreach," he said. "We will inform Hargreaves and Burton that the matter is paused." "Withdraw," I said, not pause. "Withdraw," he corrected the word, costing him a coin. "We cannot instruct regulators not to be curious." "You can withdraw what you filed," I said. "You can tell them you have nothing to add. You can stop feeding a machine you claimed you were trying not to start." Sierra stared at the almonds like they owed her something, and the amount she asked. "4," I said, "payable within 72 hours of completed withdrawals and signed agreements. Wire, no checks that perform." Harrington's jaw made a calculation. 72 is brisk. "Noise travels fast," I said. Kaplan underlined something in her notes. "Let's be explicit," she said, almost gentle. "Mrs. Ellison's proposal includes a one-time payment to Miss Hale, withdrawal of media contacts, and non-required regulatory inquiries, a mutual non-disparagement and non-contact, and an NDA that covers this negotiation and the subject matter that brought us here. In return, there is no trust and no further conversation about joint governance of Mrs. Ellison's assets. Correct?" "Correct," I said. Harrington opened his mouth and then closed it, the way a person does when they remember their dentist's advice about grinding. "We need time to review," he said. 72 hours, I answered, at which point the offer evaporates. Sierra looked at Noah the way a person looks at a door they used to use. He didn't meet her. He was studying his hands like he'd just been issued them. Vivian's smile returned to her face without her consent and sat there decorative and wrong. Kaplan put her pen down and folded her gray hands together. "I'll mark the clock," she said. "You can communicate through me or directly as counsel prefers." I closed the folio with the brass clip and stood. When I reached the door, I set a small white card by the picture. No name. Just an embossed oval that caught the room's light for a second and let it go. In the hall, the carpet absorbed footsteps like a promise. The elevator arrived without sound and opened onto a viewless box that knew where to take people who asked nicely. Downstairs, the lobby smelled of polished stone and the faintest edge of someone else's cologne. Outside, the afternoon kept its temperature. A taxi shrugged past. A man argued into a headset about a number that didn't have to be this number. I turned the ring so the crest faced my palm and walked toward a corner where the light landed at a clean angle, the kind of place you stand when you intend to be seen only by the things that watch without blinking. The email arrived with no adjectives. Executed copies attached. Kaplan's office added a timestamp and a single sentence about countersignatures logged. Hargreaves Norrell's notice of termination followed, then Burton and Lay's disengagement letter, then 2 short emails to the AG's intake and FINRA's liaison withdrawing prior voluntary outreach and stating the parties had no further information. It looked like paperwork because that's what it was. Enough paper in a neat stack can make a weather system change its mind. The wire hit mid-morning on a Thursday. My bank app colored the number green, as if color could announce that money is now a fact instead of a plan. 4 million less Council's Byte settled into the account created to hold it and go nowhere. Kaplan confirmed receipt of executed NDAs and the non-contact. Harrington sent a final line wishing all a peaceful resolution like a ribbon tied on a box he hadn't wanted to wrap. I put my phone face down on the kitchen table and listened to the refrigerator even out. The house stretched the way a room does after guests leave air reinflating into corners. Outside, delivery trucks talked to each other with their brakes. A sparrow pulled a thread from the hydrangea bush and flew off with it, determined to make use of what looked like nothing. Noah's text came hours later. Saw Kaplan's note. "Are you okay?" "Yes," I wrote. "Eat dinner." "Trying," he answered. After that, just the 3 dots that mean someone means well and can't find a sentence to carry it. Days arranged themselves. 2 boxes of glassware went to a neighbor's garage sale. A set of heavy drapes met a thrift bin. The brass clip went back to the drawer where it prefers to live. I walked the river path mornings when the joggers hadn't yet decided which playlist to trust. A train passed with the blunt mercy of schedules. The ring stayed turned inward, the crest warming against my palm. On a Sunday, Noah showed up with a bag of bagels and a tired face. We ate over the sink the way we used to when dinner had to be quick and jokes had to be quicker. He mentioned depositions at work, a client who wanted miracles at wholesale. He didn't mention Sierra. He didn't have to. He put a folded document on the counter. I didn't open it. He didn't ask me to. "She packed some things," he said. "The rest later." His voice had that hollow aftersound men get when they're tired of making their voices behave. "Put the sesame seeds down the disposal," I said. "They clog." He laughed, and the laugh remembered him. We took a walk. On Main, a boy practiced trumpet in a 3rd-floor window. The notes came unsure and sweet, like something learning which way was forward. Noah kept his hands in his jacket pockets and studied the storefronts the way people do when they're telling themselves what town they live in. At the corner, a dog made a break for a squirrel, and the leash drew a perfect line between wanting and physics. Noah watched the line and smiled. Back home, he helped me carry a box to the trunk. "You're lightening up," he said. "Less to dust," I answered. He kissed my temple and left a man walking toward paperwork he hadn't thought he'd need. When the door clicked, the house sat with me a while. Some rooms do that company that knows you don't need talk. Weeks turned. The withdrawal letters did what withdrawal letters do, nothing in public, and everything somewhere less lit. Gordon kept his committee seat. Vivian's pearls stayed in place. Headlines chose other catastrophes to practice on. My name did not learn to spell itself in print. I signed articles of incorporation for a small foundation in a 1-room office that used to sell stamps. The clerk's stapler had a clean bite. On the way out, I ran into a kid carrying a foam core model of an idea, thin tubes of fan, a blue marker explaining ambition where plastic didn't. He held the door for me and caught the corner when it tried to swing back. "Thanks," he said, eyes on a future that had borrowed his focus. At the farmer's market, the woman with the tulips found a bunch the color of peeled peaches. "First cut," she said, passing them over like a secret. I added a loaf and a wedge of something sharp. In line, a man behind me debated apples versus pears with the seriousness of an engineer choosing a gasket. Decisions stack. You pick one and then another. That afternoon, I stood in my kitchen and wrote checks from the new foundation account to 3 names that had sent in proposals on cheap paper that was careful with its spelling. The amounts were small starter money, not headlines, but they would teach someone how to move heat through a problem without losing any to the room. I pressed the pen hard enough that the carbon copy caught everything. When I walked the envelopes to the mailbox, a neighbor waved from his porch with the tolerance of someone who has seen people become versions of themselves and stay that way. A breeze came up from the river and laid a cool hand on the back of my neck. The light in the late afternoon had that exacting quality that shows what's there and what's not, and leaves the rest alone. Back inside, I put the tulips in a jar and set them where the sun lands on days it can be bothered. I turned the ring outward for a moment and let the crest take the light like proof. Then I turned it back, rinsed the knife, and laid it to dry across the sink with the blade facing in. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.